Hey everyone, this is Ryan with From Corners Unknown. I hope you're all doing well. This is our Artist Conversation series, and in this episode I speak with Erik of Aerial Ruin. Aerial Ruin is a dark folk, loner folk project comprised of acoustic guitar, electric guitar, with some use of loop-based techniques, and it all comes together to create this very ethereal, transcendental atmosphere. I learned of this project almost exactly a year ago now that I think about it, and it was about the time Erik was promoting his latest album, Nameless Sun, and he was doing a string of US tour dates, and he ended up stopping through Eugene and playing at a local tattoo parlor, which I thought was a rather interesting place to host a show. There were about 15 to 25 people crammed in this relatively small cubicle-like space, and everybody kind of formed this semicircle around Erik as he played a handful of songs off of Nameless Sun, and it was just such an intimate and moving experience. Definitely one of my favorite and most memorable shows of 2017. And soon after Nameless Sun released came the latest opus from Seattle-based funeral doom outfit Bellwitch with their album titled Mirror Reaper. It's a one dense, massive track, about 83 minutes in length, and Erik sings on the last 60% or so of the record, and I didn't really realize that when I first listened to it, but once I kind of had that revelation that the voice on the latter chunk of the album was Erik, this was still kind of in the time frame when I was familiarizing myself with his body of work, I became quite enamored with his entire body of work, and since then I've been following his music and just trying to absorb as much as I can. Erik actually ended up performing Mirror Reaper in its entirety with Bellwitch at Roadburn 2018, and just after that show Erik embarked on his own tour across Europe, playing at a handful of DIY venues, and just recently, somewhat recently, within the last couple months, he returned back to Portland, Oregon. And this was a conversation we had in person. We tried to make something work when we were out in Wyoming at the Fire in the Mountains Festival, but it was pretty difficult to be able to track each other down, no cell service, so it just didn't really work out scheduling-wise, but we were able to catch up at Mount Tabor Park in Portland, Oregon, and you'll definitely be hearing a bunch of wildlife kind of mulling about in the background, birds chirping and such, and I hope that adds a nice little organic texture to this conversation. We talk about the Mirror Reaper performance at Roadburn, Erik's DIY work ethic, and we also go into the origin of Aerial Ruin and also discuss kind of the concepts and themes and feelings that Erik grapples with and articulates with this project. There's a bunch more to be heard in the conversation ahead, and I hope you folks enjoy this conversation between myself and Erik. Just after this introduction, I will play for you folks a track off of his latest album, Nameless Sun, titled Entropy. And to close the conversation, I will play the title track of that album. And just as a quick note before we get to the conversation, there are a couple passages in this conversation where the words will fade out and some track snippets will fade in, and the hope is to contextualize some of the concepts Erik is discussing or describing, and I hope that this comes through nicely, and I hope it makes the conversation more engaging, and please feel free to let me know how you feel about these, because I'm hoping to incorporate more of these layerings throughout conversations going forward. As always, thank you so much for listening, and thank you for your continued support, and thank you for any and all support you can give Erik and Aerial Ruin.
Empty are the gallows, and I am still believing, a vacant tomb no longer in the way. Deeper are the shallows, and all are left for bleeding, to seek among the reeds that they betray. stricken now victory, and loss is what they'll bleed in. Comfort in the arms that held decay. For lavishness of mystery, and lust for all deceiving, and hope to lift the truth from where it lay. Entropy, inception, and balance within meaning, heard among the fools and heroes call. Sense within deception, and gallantry in reeling, where finery adorns the hands that maul. If you're out of sequence and hope is disbelieving, I see you where escape has led us all. But blur before you seize it and hope for another region, and free the care that holds you to the wall. The truth inside the lie. I called your name upon the fallow fields from where you're gone. Sacred is no longer held at bay. When you're collapsing in a dream, be no more need of you to scream. When your deception is a lie, I know your truth won't need to hide. I know your truth won't need to hide.
Yeah, so you've been touring extensively, right?
Yeah.
You were out, and how long? When did you start you embarked for Europe? Was that in early April, or was
Yes.
that okay?
I think I jumped on the Bellwitch tour April 9th in Berlin, I think it was.
Okay.
Maybe it was the 7th. Yeah. Then I was out with them for 2 weeks, and which gave us a chance to rehearse the collaborative sets for Roadburn.
Right. Right.
And then we culminated with Roadburn, where I did both the regular Aerial Ruin set and 2 sets singing with Bellwitch.
Wow.
And then I continued on for, I think I did 22 more shows by myself.
Wow.
That I booked, like DIY style myself, and
sure.
Going around on the bus and the train, public transportation style.
Wow. And have you done extensive European touring
Yeah.
before? Okay.
This is the 4th time.
Wow.
I've been. The first was opening for Sangre de Mordigo,
okay.
who's really awesome sort of forest folk from Galicia in Spain.
Huh. Okay.
So I played with them over here in the States and become friends with the leader, Pablo.
Okay.
And then, so I kind of talked them into letting me open for a 2-week tour in Central Europe in 2014.
Sure.
And that kind of got me my contacts. And then I went back a year later, and then again, like a year and a half after that. And every tour kind of gets longer, and I go further away from that Central European base into Scandinavia, and this time into Eastern Europe with Bellwitch, like playing in Poland and Hungary.
And those were those?
Those were places I'd never been before. That was really cool.
Huh. And how is it? I mean, is it when you go out there, so you're scheduling everything yourself? Is it more of like a control thing? Like, is it just easier for you to kind of set up all your own shows as opposed to, I don't know, having somebody else? I've not gone on tour before, so I don't know how difficult it is to get all that set up. But going through, like, say, a booking agency or what have you, is it just much simpler and less stressful?
Well, I'm pretty DIY, still pretty obscure. I'm slowly sort of growing a small following into a slightly less small following.
Sure. Sure.
And I've certainly been doing some stuff that's much more visible. Like playing some bigger festivals in the last sort of year and a half.
Right.
So and then the Bellwitch connection is kind of slowly getting me to a larger audience because they're a much bigger band.
Yeah.
But still, I'm still pretty underground, so my world is very DIY. I'd say by a combination of necessity, but also choice. I mean, I really like it that way.
Sure.
And so, I really enjoy doing the DIY booking and the sort of the people you meet who generally are putting on shows for love of music, and it's not some sort of a business kind of commercial transaction where they're expecting you to bring X amount of people into a club and sell X amount of beers and all that kind of thing.
Right.
So, I think maybe in the next couple of years there may be opportunities to work with booking agents here and there, but it's not something I'm seeking out for the sake of it. I think that I'll probably likely keep a lot of my world DIY just because it kind of suits me, I think.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm still not exactly I'm still a pretty underground sort of an entity. So
how has it been with this, like the gradual uptick in, I don't know if notoriety is the right word to use, but have you seen it? Like, how has it been scaling up for you? Has it been increasing slowly but surely over the last couple years or so?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been doing this project for a long time.
Yeah.
When I in the early days of me living in Portland, I got to do 4 shows with Agalock, and I think that's like the one of the first experiences I had playing for bigger audiences.
Sure.
But then it's after that, I wasn't really touring outside of just doing the 3 shows I did with them on the East Coast or doing little West Coast mini tours by myself.
Right.
So then it was much, and, I wasn't really well known out of my, outside of any circles that I may have developed just from older bands that I'd played in and stuff like that.
Sure.
So, I still feel like any following I'm building is mostly just from playing one show at a time because I'm not on a label and I don't really get any publicity, not much anyway.
Sure.
So thank you for this.
Yeah, of course.
And I haven't really had time to try to seek that out, It's like I'm I'm releasing my own albums. I play everything myself. I book my own tours, so I haven't really had time to also be my own publicist very much.
But are you?
There are some exceptions to that. There have been some features over the years.
Sure.
So, yeah. So, but I think with the Nameless Sun album, that is, it's still very much on a sort of a underground level. But like I've definitely sold a lot more copies of that, both through Bandcamp, and especially on tour. It's a lot quicker than any of the albums. Like it's already outsold all of my previous albums.
Wow.
So that's cool, I haven't even put out a vinyl version of it yet. So,
right.
I mean, but don't get me wrong, I'm not claiming these are any kind of sort of big number or anything, but it is sort of an uptick. So it is, but I would say still very much in the slowly but surely kind of a thing. Like I'm not claiming to be any, anything other than,
sure.
obscure, unloving it or something.
Right. Well, when you were out in Europe, what was one of your most, what was one of your most favorite shows on like your last European like stretch?
It was all pretty awesome, really. Like the 2 weeks going out with Bellwitch. I mean, I didn't book that because
they did all that.
Because that was their existing tour, and it made sense for me to go out and open for them. So partially so we could have time to rehearse for Roadburn, because they had deliberately tried to book these special sets that was doing Mirror Reaper in its entirety for the first time ever, and the only time so far, and that requires me because I sing on the latter 40% of it fairly prominently.
Yes.
So they elsewise they've just been touring the first sort of 60%. That's what they've been their set like on every other. Most other things. And then so we did a second set where we did the songs that I sing on the older albums. And then I also just did a normal solo Aerial Ruin set. But anyway, I guess I'm digressing here a bit, but they booked all that. And so that was a great experience because those were sort of bigger shows and it was super fun.
Right.
I wasn't singing with them for the tour before Roadburn. I was just sort of opening for them because we were keeping those sets exclusive. But the shows in Poland were very sort of memorable, and it was very clear to me that I was in a new place and with a sort of a new culture where Western influence is much less and people don't speak English as much.
Sure.
And there's this sort of perhaps enthusiasm for music in general, and certainly all the music that was happening at those shows that I hadn't encountered in the same way. And then the Roadburn sets were all pretty magical. It was very memorable experience. And then, I know there's so many different types of really killer experiences on that. Like I wasn't on the, Bellwitch played Doom Over Leipzig, and I wasn't on the fest proper, but when they found out that I was on the tour, they were just like, here, come and play at our, because a part of the Doom Over Leipzig festival is this art market. So they're like, you can just come and play this acoustic set at the art market. And I played, and then everyone kind of gathered around, and I sold a bunch of stuff, and it was really sort of fun and unique. And, I was...
And it was just totally one-off, it just kind of arose?
Well, no, I mean, they booked it and advertised it.
Oh, okay.
But it was it was sort of maybe 2 weeks before the fest that actually got ironed in, and then played so many fun house shows that I booked myself after I went off from Bellwitch, from Slovenia to Switzerland to Belgium, and opening for Sangre de Mortigo twice in Germany. Those are always magical times, and then playing with my friend Nest out in Finland for the first time. Kalliomäki, some friends of theirs who are very unique and very uniquely Finnish. So yeah.
How did some of the sets, when you play live in, say, a house relative to just a typical venue, what is it about playing in a house or basement, or I don't know exactly what kind of setups you've been in, what makes it more, I guess, to use the word magical for you? Do you find those more intimate venues to be more magical or just engaging in some way relative to larger venues?
Sometimes, I mean, large venues can be great too in the right kind of settings. But I find that my music live, it tends to get big in a small room. It kind of just the quieter tones just sort of become large and kind of have a tendency to suck people in. Whereas sometimes in a bigger room, it's much more it's small compared to the size. The sound is small compared to the size of the room, and it can be more lost and more competing with people chitter-chattering in the background. If it's a small room, it's much more likely for everyone to shut the fuck up. And that's really nice.
Yes.
I don't get very particular about people chatting. I just decided not to, be too pretentious about that. If they're going to talk, they're going to talk. I'm not going to complain about it. But obviously, it's nice when they don't.
Right.
So yeah, those intimate sort of house shows could just be really great. Like I played this like out in Bennekom near Belgium. Like it's like this out in the country. These really nice people like hosted me for the second time, and it's just they have this sort of kind of finished garage that they've kind of turned into a showroom. And
cool.
all these couches kind of like circling around this corner. And,
that's awesome.
And it was just very sort of atmospheric and
they just do they tend to invite a bunch of smaller or just like
it was a
contact
contact through friends of friends. I mean, there's lots of people doing sort of house shows,
Interesting.
I mean, here in the States and probably more in Europe,
Yeah.
There are a lot of DIY spots, or in Europe there's lots of places, like lots of squats that do shows.
Interesting.
And just kind of, played Anarchist Info Shop and Ljubljana, Slovenia, like a bunch of times,
Sure.
There's just a lot of like these just sort of DIY communities doing non-commercial, non-businessy type of shows. So
I see.
That's where I tend to end up a lot, those types of places. But I played lots of sort of more kind of commercial metal venues, especially on the Bell Witch leg too.
Yeah.
And then we had some really great sound systems on that leg where like it wasn't like I was suffering from the... I think that, in more recent years, I've been getting much better luck with getting people to pay attention, at the bigger kind of metal venues and suffering less from people chitter-chattering.
Sure.
And it's also partially, I think maybe partially because I've gotten better, but also because I'm kind of doing like a slightly louder set now. Like I have a better rig for the guitar, so I'm able to, it's still very quiet, but I'm able to get it louder. And then I'm using like a live vocal looper and a live guitar looper.
Right.
So like I did at Fire in the Mountains. So that makes it kind of more dynamic, and I think maybe sucks people in more than like say the set I was doing 3-4 years ago where I was like trying to mic my guitar and I wasn't doing any of that stuff.
Interesting, yeah.
So it was just technically much more quiet.
Sure. How was it doing the... I almost... Well, I thought about going out to Roadburn, and then I kind of did all the math and saw how much it costed, just getting a place to stay and all that, because I wanted to go fly out and check out the... Because I saw you guys were doing that set, and I was pretty amazed just thinking about like how that, like just playing the entire Mirror Reaper track in its entirety. How was that playing that live? Was that the one and only time, or did you say you did that?
No, that's the only time that's been done.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not the only time I've sang with them, but it's it's the only time that has been done so far. And it was amazing. It was really, we had driven from Leipzig, which is about a 7-8 hour drive the night before, and nobody had much more than 3 hours of sleep. Wow. And then we got up and, it was like this big hall, like 1,100 capacity, big sort of weird warehousey bunker type of like hall. And then they started playing at 2, and like they didn't even, me and Dylan were like walking around trying to find food. And they didn't even really have a chance to eat. But since I didn't have to be on there till, like 50 minutes later, I was actually able to get food before going out stage.
So they were playing the first part of the track here. It's like, oh, you're just chilling out.
Yeah, well, I don't sing till,
That's true. Yeah,
minute 48 or something.
Sure.
So I'm obviously, I was joking about okay, we're going to get the best, most heavy metal looking lazy boy to like just sit there and read a book on stage before my vocal parts start. But no, of course I didn't do that.
That would have been hilarious.
So I normally don't get very nervous about performing, but I was nervous with this because we'd never done it before, and there's so much space in the whole section that I'm playing.
Yeah.
Like it's, it begins with this 20-minute super minimalistic ambient part where like Dylan's bass riffs are super slow, and then Jesse's just coming in very slowly with like cymbal swells and eventually like subtle organ stuff. But when you have all that space, it's the potential to get musically lost may have like more severe
of course, sure
severe consequences. So
but
once I came out on stage, it was I kind of like warmed into it pretty quickly, and it was pretty magical. The sound system was great, and the audience was really cool. So I think we got through it, and any mistakes may have happened were not a big deal, and the feel was there. It felt very inspired and special and memorable, and was a huge relief to also just have off of our plates, But then, of course, I got off stage, and then I did the Aerial Ruin set like 6 hours later, and then we did the second Bell Witch set the next day. So it was a working weekend. It really was.
It sounds like it. Yeah. And do you typically, before you go live, do you practice at all, or are you pretty locked in with playing so much on the road, shows leading up to it and such.
Well, with Aerial Ruin, I don't. I try to warm up if I can, but I don't always. Like I find that like when I'm on tour, I get clicked into that way of like being in pretty good shape just by playing the set every day.
Yeah.
You know, and at home I'll actually often play more than just say the 40 minutes of a set that I would normally play, but you just get used to performing. So, I don't necessarily warm up, and it's not a big deal if I can't.
Sure.
But with that, we had practiced, 6 days beforehand in Hungary when we had a day off, and then we went back on the road for a while longer. So we had to, remember the set from that, and then all the practicing we'd done before leaving the States, which was 6 weeks before. So, so it was a bit nerve-wracking as a first-time experience. When 6 hours later, when I just did the Aerial Ruin set, that was very relaxing because I was just kind of, even though I was exhausted, I was in the flow with that stuff.
Yeah. What are you guys gonna? Are there plans to ever do it again, or is it one of those things where you kind of wanted it to make it? Is it kind of like a special thing that may occur for other festivals or certain appearances later on down the road?
I think there's some possible Mirror Reaper in full sets, but I'm glad that I'm allowed to edit this because I'm not sure how much I'm supposed to be talking about that.
Oh.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Would you say that it's the case that you get larger turnouts at shows on the East Coast generally, or is that not necessarily true?
I don't think necessarily in general.
Okay.
I think that Bellwitch, even though like Seattle's their hometown, I don't think that's where they get their best crowds.
Okay.
They definitely do better in Europe, and I think they probably do better in other parts of the country.
Sure.
They've definitely gotten bigger with this album. Seems that they always get a good crowd here in Portland, but they kind of laugh at the fact that, like, in their hometown, they don't do as well as they do most other places.
Yeah.
So how they stack up in the East Coast compared to the West Coast, I'm not really sure. But yeah, certainly in Europe they do really well.
So I guess the project as a whole, how has it progressed for you, just generally speaking, since the time you found it till now? Have you been able to, like, have you worked with artists you didn't really expect to work with, and like has the project kind of evolved in certain ways that you really didn't anticipate when you first set out with a project, and kind of how, like, has it just evolved in just ways that you never really thought it would over time?
Well, in one sense, it's kind of always a continuation of the same sort of a thing. Like, it's not it's somewhat of a sort of spiritual exercise for me. It's kind of like started as a way to channel some sort of psychedelic and sort of spiritual experiences that I'd had. And so, like, there's definitely a feeling of like it's sort of a flow, and I'm kind of continuing to write the same piece, like sort of thematically and everything like that. So like all the themes and the inspiration tends to kind of come from that same sort of continuing source. So it's not like a sort of a thing where, like, some people want to make a deliberate attempt to make their current records sound different than their past records. Like,
sure.
I'm not like that. I'm much more like, I want to continue to do this. But when I look back on it musically, I think it has progressed. Like, I think if you look at my most recent material compared to the very oldest stuff, it's actually quite different. And so with the stream of consciousness, spiritual sort of nature of the lyrics, that's very cool. I really enjoy continuing to write that piece, but then also, there's a fine line between doing something that's sort of, linear and thematic and building upon something else, than sort of repeating yourself. So, I don't want to be repeating myself, but I also want to be kind of like just building on what I've already done. So
sure.
For me, I'm always trying to kind of like, go further into an area without just sort of staying in the same place in that area, I guess is be one metaphor.
Sure.
I guess to say it.
Yeah, I can never structure my thoughts very well, but around these, like, sometimes the concepts get a little too. Sometimes they get a little too heady for me. But is it almost for you, like when you say the psychedelic stuff? Is it like an astral out of body sort of? Like what is it in reference to?
Well,
if you can specify it a little bit.
Sure.
I know it can be pretty abstract. It sounds like it's abstract, so it may be hard to put.
Well,
words.
I think like I think that when a lot of people talk about the psychedelic experience, they speak about, like, stripping away the human ego and the human filter, and
Right.
seeing things from a perspective that is not through the filter of your human senses and human consciousness. So that's a lot of it, but a lot of it is, it's very much about how that sort of happened to me and how that tied into the music and the thoughts that, were happening with me before that and after that, and this sort of journey, and kind of, I'm not quite sure how to expand on it.
Is there a specific moment in time that kind of started, like, is there like a certain moment or experience that kind of like kicked you into like starting Aerial Ruin as well, or is that like did that lead into the project in any way, the psychedelic experience, if that makes sense, like making the project to kind of grapple with it in some sense, if that makes sense?
Yeah, well, I think I was working pretty hard at stripping away that sort of human filter at a younger point in my life, and kind of maybe feeling more in touch with that sort of mental perspective on a daily basis. And it kind of came to a head and, had some negative connotations as well with my, interfering with my human lifestyle.
Sure.
But it was very interesting. And from a musical and dynamic perspective, like at the time I was playing in my band Old Grandad, which is like a metal band, and I was doing some melodic vocals with that, but it was it was always hard to hear myself just over the massive amount of volume, because we were a very, very loud band, So it was natural to have, and then that music was all very extrovert, I mean, we did have some more out there kind of psychedelic stuff. A lot of that kind of came from me, but even with that, like, it still had a very extrovert quality when you're just this loud metal band, and, a lot of it is all about kind of you getting energy from an audience, and that, they get energy from you, and that becomes one sort of a thing.
Right.
But Aerial Ruin is sort of the antithesis. It's like something that I never even dreamed about doing live for the longest time. It was something like where I would do the very earliest recordings in the early 2000s at home, and my upstairs neighbor was home. I wouldn't even work on it because I felt so like I needed to be completely alone, And then from a sort of dynamic perspective, my voice is very quiet and works very well melodically when I sing very quiet. So like it made sense to have something where I could sing quietly and not have to battle with this loud amount of volume to do my thing. And then the space of, experimenting with clean electric guitars and acoustic guitars, and, having recording gear for the first time in my life, which I had at the time. Like I had an ADAT, like an old, digital 8-track kind of thing, or before that, like a Tascam cassette 4-track and all that kind of stuff. So it started out that way, and so it was that combined with these, sort of far out sort of psychedelic spiritual experiences that kind of just led down this path. And and then it's interesting because sometimes there will be a more specific narrative that will pop up and kind of like take certain songs in certain directions. Like certain songs will decide to sort of seemingly by themselves be about something specific that's not the general sort of flow of the rest of the lyrics, maybe tied to it in some way. But those are sort of the exception more than the rule.
Upward gaze at earth and stand, quickened eye and shaping hand. Let your works between the lines, but felt no need to fall in prayer. And as I drowned the desert through, kinder hand was wiser too. Told of more than the lowest part, and pulled me from the lake I fall. All you
are. More it's kind of about the continuing. I'm not sure how much sense this makes, but
I mean, it makes sense to me. And do you feel like with each album, each song, do you feel like you get more in touch or closer to kind of these like kind of like that feeling you're kind of, I don't know, like that strip back feeling? I mean, like, do you feel like you're getting closer. I don't know if understanding is the right way, but just like being more in touch with it.
I think it's always been very in touch with it.
Okay.
I think that it's been from the very beginning. That was sort of why the project was happening, you know.
Sure.
But I think a better metaphor is like you're just going to, if you look at it, you know, look at it like a journey through an area, like a park or something like that. I'm going into different parts of the park, but the park has a unified quality to it. So, you know. And yeah, when with the Nameless Sun, with the newest album, it took on a bit of a different, more specific themes in the sense that I started thinking about like loss and mourning, and then kind of equating that with like the massive distances between the stars, you know. And so, you know, thinking about the comparisons to just, you know, even the closest star system, the Alpha Centauri star system, which is like 4.3 light years away, just the massive distance that is, that most people don't even understand at all how far away that is. And then thinking about people that I've recently lost, or just the distance between anyone who has just lost someone that they love or care about, and that sort of distance, and the parallels between the physical distance and the distance that you have with someone who's no longer with us here.
From where you are, you've gone too far. You'll now collapse the nearest star. You'll toll the bell, and where it dwells, beyond the seeking of the shell, to stray afar from pale star, where need will scatter with the star.
I thought that kind of became a theme that kind of cropped up through about maybe half the lyrics of that album.
Interesting.
And then also this sheer violence of like stellar nuclear fusion, which is really the only reason that any of this is here, right? You know what I mean? It's like we are just like the remnants of a star, and if that wasn't for, hydrogen fusing into helium in this massive orb up there, none of this would be happening.
Right.
So those themes kind of really arose in a somewhat more specific way for Nameless Sun within the context of the larger themes that I've been talking about.
Sure.
So that was kind of a new part of the exploration in a sense that I found interesting.
Okay, interesting. So when you talk about kind of that analogy of like going through the park, or kind of like the whole, like the unified whole, and you're kind of going to different portions of the park, or going to, kind of with each album, it's kind of like seeing a different piece of this larger whole. This is probably an inane question, but like, do you know like what the whole and kind of like the whole unifying bit is, if that makes sense? Like, are you trying to still scaffold and put something together with your albums? Like, is there something that you feel like you're trying to understand still, or are you still seeking something like conceptually or metaphysically?
It's not at all an inane question. I think it's an interesting one, but I think that the answer is probably no, really. I think it's much more it's more like a flow, and like the weird contradictions that one seems to get when you try to put words onto a sort of psychedelic or spiritual experience. It's in my experience anyway, it can be like there's a great quote from a book I read about the history of LSD called Storming Heaven, where he said that like when you try to describe the psychedelic experience, words sort of flow off of it. And I think that's you kind of put this language on top of this sort of experience, and it's more kind of they sort of slide off of it,
Sure.
So it's more finding meaning, I guess, in less traditional, less narrative sort of ways. It's could be said to be an exploration for the sake of it, more than building a scaffold. And it's just kind of happening, I can't really describe a way to say that it's going to some sort of a completion, I suppose. I think it's much more of a continuum, really.
Yeah, that makes sense. I haven't been able to read as much of, say, your lyrics. I mean, I've been able to pick up more and more as I continue to listen to your records, especially Nameless Sun, because I've been listening to that one quite a bit. Do you find, like, when you're talking about the stream of consciousness, is it, in some sense, is it almost like sometimes you write the words and sometimes you don't necessarily know what they mean in some respects? Is that a right way? Like, how do you...
Yeah, sometimes. I think that a lot of times, basically, like, I'll start writing songs and I'll kind of come up with a vocal melody or guitar part, sometimes together, sometimes one before the other.
Right.
And then the song, like the melody and the guitar part, will sometimes be pretty much complete. And then, like, in the process of that, like, certain lines will have emerged in this rough draft.
Yeah.
You know, and I'll maybe do like recordings where, like, I'm kind of just improvising words, so to speak.
I see.
And then I'll look at that, and then there'll be things that emerge that, like, are, you know, kind of pointing in a more specific way. And then I'll sit down with those, and then I'll go over them, sometimes many times, and kind of fill in the gaps. So yeah, like, I'm not trying to write I'm not trying to write a song about anything.
Yes.
It's more, you know, more of a ritual can be a sort of a corny cliche word, but
Sure.
you know.
No, I think the sentiment, I'm understanding the sentiment, though.
Yeah. Like I said, I think there are exceptions when, like, you know, I will write a song there are a few songs that are specifically about something,
Right.
but those are really a minority. You
Okay.
know? And then, like, with, like, the themes I was talking about, in Nameless Sun,
Yeah.
those kind of came about in the process of just, you know, like, not deliberately. They just kind of came about. Came about, and then, like, they're sort of, like, you know, most specifically, like, in, you know, Level the Hourglass and How Far in the title track, you know, and maybe to a lesser extent the other songs, but those songs kind of really sort of dug into some of those themes.
Sure.
So yeah, it got more specific there, but it happened sort of more after the fact, like when the songs were already, you know, mostly written, and then it kind of those themes sort of emerged. So then I kind of completed the thoughts in a more specific way after the fact.
Right. And when you're going forward, and you know, whenever you feel compelled to start writing, or if you're looking to record at some point soon, is it so the way that those lyrics with certain themes kind of seeped in, that was kind of just a moment of, that's just kind of happenstance? You're not really seeing that being a key change or like a paradigm shift in the way you write your lyrics going forward, per se? It was kind of like the way the loss and all that, it kind of just, at that moment in time when you were writing the tracks or writing the lyrics, it just kind of crept in that way?
Yeah, I think it does just sort of creep in. I mean, you know,
Okay.
I mean, it can be inspired by personal experiences for sure, but I find that, like, you know, part of the musical experience of writing is the words that just sort of come out naturally when I'm thinking of a vocal melody and singing
Sure.
something. Like phrases just sort of kind of, you know, will attach themselves to certain melodies. And so that will be sometimes the beginning of the direction of a certain song. And so, yeah, and that would kind of really happen with this, and I'm not quite sure how else to put that.
Yeah. Would you say the stream of consciousness, God, I can't talk, thing interests me too? Is there, when you write some of the lyrics and you may not necessarily understand, like, the full, like, sometimes it's just a phrase or what have you, do you ever think at some point down the road it'll, like, just click and make sense to you at some point, if that makes sense? Like you write words and sometimes you're kind of writing feelings or kind of channeling that stream of energy, but you may not necessarily understand. Do you think, like, at some point later on, you know, in years down the road, it'll click at some point, or is it?
Well, no, because that's again thinking more of, that's sort of implying more of a narrative,
okay,
and a story,
sure.
which, like, you know, isn't really quite what, like, you know, isn't really the way that I express this project. So
yeah. Okay.
But, you know, like with the title track, like, I was, like, you know, actually, I think before recording this album, I actually was playing an early version of that on a long tour. Was it in 2016? I can't quite remember. But and so, and then like the lyrics were, only sort of half finished at the time, but like I kept
Sure.
like you saying the phrase "Nameless Sun" because it repeats a few times in there, and so then that was sort of the beginning of thinking about that, and then
Okay.
that song is very, like a lot of my songs, the metaphors will kind of express themselves in like a sense of a physical journey, like almost like in disembodied type of physical journey, so it'll sort of it'll kind of take on that kind of a thing, but so with when I started to think of that phrase "Nameless Sun," that started the whole process of doing that. And then the opening song on the album, "How Far," was another level of that. And then the song "Level of the Hourglass." That's, I think, the most sort of specifically stellar sort of song, like in the sense of being about stars.
Right.
And
Right.
imagining a sort of psychedelic, sort of dreamlike version of experiencing that. They're not like scientific renderings or anything.
Right, right. What is it about? Say the cosmos that fascinates you?
Well, I've just always been fascinated by space. Like I'm not a very mathematical person. Never got much out of sort of, traditional education or anything. But I feel like, the universe is just so unbelievably vast, and we are just this little extension of it that is capable. We're just this little piece of the universe that is capable of observing itself. And that's a fascinating position to be in.
Yeah.
So, like I read a lot, and it's mostly science fiction which is not to say I don't really enjoy non-science fiction sometimes, but I will live my whole life on this planet. It's very unlikely that I will get to
You'll be
even
going to Mars or
going into orbit even.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
For my mental life, I don't want to be stuck here. So there's something that's just ever fascinating about the vastness of the cosmos and the possibilities and the mystery and the things that we don't understand.
Right.
And it is, and it's an interesting parallel to the vastness of the mind, and,
Right.
and the way when you strip away the day-to-day human experience, the surprising places that you can end up in mentally.
Sure.
And music and psychedelic drugs and also meditation and all sorts of things can, sort of aid you in this.
Sure.
So yeah, those two, journeys are just very interesting. It's very opposite from, say, the inspiration of, like, say, I've become a huge Elliott Smith fan in like the last 15 years.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
but that was after the earliest Aerial Ruin stuff was written and recorded. So like I don't really view him as an influence, and I think it's a really interesting comparison because his music is very dark, but from this sort of like kind of popish indie folk sort of a perspective, and his lyrics and I love most of his lyrics, but they're very much about his day-to-day sort of human experiences and his relationships and everything like that.
Right.
And as a fan, I absolutely appreciate that. But that's the opposite of where I draw my inspiration. Like, Aerial Ruin is not really about Erik Mogridge, the human being. It's like,
Sure.
you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
that's that's not interesting to me. So yeah, it's it's an interesting contrast, I think, in artistic inspiration.
Is there
Like if I was gonna write a bunch of songs about my life or about the way I was feeling as a human being, I wouldn't call it Aerial Ruin. I would give it a different name, and that's why I have a band name for the project instead of just using my human name, because
Right.
I may be the only member with occasional guests coming in, but I think of it like a band because
see.
it's this journey away from my life.
It's an entity separate from your own body.
Yeah,
in a
it's
sense.
an exploration of an attempt to explore the things that are beyond my human experience.
I see.
Hopefully, it doesn't sound too pretentious.
No. What's I don't know much about Cosmos, but just out of curiosity, is there like a certain idea or theory or observation you've had about the cosmos that's like deeply struck you in some way? Like, is there like a specific, I don't know, like something that like just really hit you at the core and like inspired you or influenced you in some way?
Well, I think it's there's so much. It's also inspiring, and to state my position straight up, like I don't believe in like UFOs bringing aliens to the planet.
Sure.
Like, that's not my perspective.
Sure.
What I think is I believe that alien life most likely does exist,
Sure.
and perhaps technological alien life. But if anyone understands the vast distances between stars, I think realizes that the chances of aliens who look like human beings with funny eyes visiting us in spaceships that look like saucers that's just not how it's going to go down if we ever
Right.
did make contact.
Right.
And then if you look at like an octopus, that's something that we have a common ancestor with here on this planet. And look how alien that looks compared to, say, UFOologists sort of think that, these aliens that are abducting us look like. Not that I want to put words in these people's mouths, because
Right.
I don't know. I mean, it's just my impression from, absorbing mass media here and there. But what I find interesting is, the search for alien life is a totally profound and fascinating thing. But it's very possible that we have alien life here in our own solar system, like in the oceans underneath the frozen surface of Europa, Jupiter's moon, for example.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure I very much doubt that it's technological life, and it might just be
Like microbes or
yeah,
some small.
yeah. Or maybe we don't understand. There's a lot of organic material like going into the Europa because of all the tidal locking, pulling all the ice back and forth.
So
it's,
you know so much more.
Yeah.
I know the name Europa. I remember it. I kind of remember that it's a moon of what planet is it? Is it
Jupiter.
Jupiter? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's like
Right.
Enceladus, I think, is a moon of Saturn. I think also is thought to maybe have some liquid water on it. And they even think that maybe Pluto has liquid water under the surface, And it's, there is liquid water on Mars. There's aquifers, which are underground rivers, running down there.
Sure.
So it's possible that there is,
Yeah.
and all this life may be microbial. It's not that much of a stretch to think there could be like small fish-like creatures like in Europa.
Right.
So these
Right.
are all very, immensely interesting prospects that we technologically could discover the answers to in our lifetime if, the funding was ever put behind it.
Right.
And then, like say Breakthrough Starshot is like an attempt to make these, they're trying to like have this thing where they're going to send like tiny little postage stamp size computers/cameras and attached to
heard of
these
that.
massive solar sails. They're going to be like micro thin, and then elevated to the or accelerated, I should say, to the speed of 20% the speed of light, and sent to the nearest star system, Alpha Centauri. So the idea is that in 25 years that this could be ready to go, and then 20 years after that, these probes could arrive at the nearest star system and collect data and take photos, and
Wow.
and then so within 55 years we could actually have data from the nearest star system, which is something that just seemed entirely impossible 30-40 years ago.
Wow. Yeah. I had no idea even about
Yeah.
that. That sounds really interesting.
This is like a bunch of different sort of rich people getting together, trying to start this project.
Sure.
It's all very theoretical, and it may never happen. But the fact that people are trying to do that, I mean, it's so fascinating to think about all this stuff. And then if alien civilizations did exist, it always seems like all these assumptions that there would be anything in common, like culture or anything communicable at all with another,
Right.
with creature who evolved on a separate planet, that would just be so different that we'd be hardly recognizable. But then again, if any creature was technological, they would have to manipulate the same forces of nature that we do.
Sure.
So, they could be sending signals with radio waves or gravitational waves, or, it's not like they can make up their own, laws of physics to manipulate.
Right.
They have the same ones that we do.
Right. Right.
It's just the endlessness of the mystery, and the vastness of everything that is just
And is that-
knows no bounds.
Right. And
Whereas
is that-
everything, we are surrounded by boundaries on this planet, as amazing as
Right.
this planet is,
Right. Right. And is that like a constant? Does that constantly push you forward, and or does that just keep you engaged and inspired to continue writing and producing
Yeah.
music and such?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, really, this album is really the first time these themes have kind of came into Aerial Ruin, because it's been even more abstract and sort of psychedelic in the past than
Sure.
that.
Sure.
I thought a lot about just sort of traditional spiritual, themes, like the idea of gods and the idea of Satan and fallen angels and heaven and hell, and if you look at these ideas and you attach some sort of a metaphorical meaning, how close can you get to a sort of a literal meaning when what you're talking about is essentially an energy that is is not really of the universe so much as you know.
Sure.
But at some point you get to, if you're describing a very powerful sort of energy, when you get to something that produces this sort of sense of feeling or this, you know, spiritual experience for you, if you can find metaphors or ways to talk about that energy that really produce that for you, that is in a sense the closest way, that's the closest thing you can get to a literal way of talking about this energy, if you sort of acknowledge that it's not a literal thing that you're talking about.
Right.
So I find it really fascinating to kind of skirt the boundary of metaphor and literal interpretation for ways that I can describe things that I feel I've experienced that maybe have some commonality with other people's, you know, spiritual experiences, especially when you go through iconic, you know, imagery from, you know, all the world's religions, and what does that mean to different people, and you know, with metal having drawn so much from, say, Satanism, and what that means to everybody, you know. So that's been part of the exploration of Aerial Ruin as well, you know, kind of that, you know, why is it that darker side of the spiritual realm and life experience too perhaps has so much power to people. It's been very interesting for me.
Right. And would you say that even the guitar melodies and kind of the way you structure and pull these songs together, do those kind of help invoke that feeling for you as well? And is that something that is that kind of what you hope people take away in a sense from listening to your music, like either live setting or just sitting down and listening to the record with headphones or what have you, like kind of getting this spiritual out of body, kind of this getting in touch with the auras or some
I hope so. I think so, because I think that they are inspired, those, you know, say the guitar melodies, or, you know, like you asked, they are inspired by that stuff, and then hopefully conjuring it as well. So it's, you know, they are kind of in the stream of it for me, and that's where I'm sort of taking myself. So, and I feel like, when I've had my most inspired performances where, you know, the audiences maybe have had their greatest connection with, and I've gotten feedback from people, they do sort of say things like that like, you know, like you really took me on a journey there, and I was really feeling that kind of thing too. And so I think that that is great when people say that. But I also think that there's not really any wrong answers with music, right? I mean, there's not, especially with something as abstract as Aerial Ruin, there's not really an incorrect interpretation. I mean, I can imagine an incorrect interpretation because, you know, someone could, you know, but I think, you know, I'm not trying to, I think, you know, it can mean different things to different people, right? So, and a lot of times people sort of say, oh, it's so sad. And I remember at first I used to sort of say, like, yeah, I guess it is. But I think the more I've thought about it over the years, I feel like sad is such a simple word, you know.
Whenever I
it's
listen
way too
to
simple.
it, so when I first stumbled upon you, and this isn't, we don't have to get too deep into it, but I saw you in, like, just randomly one-off at Ritual Tattoo, I think. You played, You played in the tattoo shop, and it was, like, such an intimate, you know, like, the walls and, like, the floor was, like, all concrete, or it was, like, you know, all the sound reverberated really nicely, and it just kind of had this really, I don't know, it was just very moving, and I don't know, the descriptor of sad, I don't know, I felt more inspired and compelled to, like...
Cool, thank you.
I don't know, like sad. I can see folks, like, kind of just, because sometimes the descriptors that are thrown out are like loner folk or what have you, like they kind of give it that description, or dark, and they give it like, I don't know, sad just doesn't seem, or even depressing, it doesn't seem like that, but maybe
I think sad or depressing are not inaccurate. You know,
right.
But I think that they're just, it's sort of simple words. And then when people say depressing, I mean, they you know, people call some of my favorite music, like, you know, like Pink Floyd or Elliott Smith, they call that depressing too. But I think, to me, that doesn't mean that, like, it makes you depressed to listen to it. As a fan talking about that music, it's like, you know, it is very dark, but I mean, I think that when you connect with music that, you know, takes you to these places, in a sense it's a sort of uplifting, because it's sort of like, you know, you're finding company in places that are maybe parallel to places that you've been yourself. But, you know, like, you know, the tapestry of human emotion and experience is so complex and deep, and sorrow and loss and everything that we experience on the darker side of the human experience is also tied in with, you know, so much that is joyous and everything. And I think in art is where those things really come together, art and music. And so it's like, you know, sure, that might be. I can see why people would say it's sad, and I don't think that's an inaccurate thing. But like,
Sure.
I do feel it's an oversimplification, really.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I was curious. So there's this funny. Well, I thought it was funny. You may not find it very funny, but I was back down near San Jose with my folks like a year and a half ago, and I was wearing your shirt for your Nameless Sun, and I was at this Mexican restaurant with my parents, and I was eating food, and this guy that was waiting for his order up at the counter kept like staring at me, and I was kind of getting weirded out, and right as he got his food to leave, he said, "Oh my God, is that an Aerial Ruin shirt?" And like we had a conversation. Then I never got his name, but he mentioned that he used to be in Epidemic.
Yeah.
And I never knew anything of it, but I just thought it was such a strange, because I didn't realize the scope, and it just seems like it was such a microcosmic connection. But when that guy came up to me, and then I went somewhat recently and listened to Epidemic, I wanted to ask a bit about the just kind of how the change in tone and style, like what you've probably talked about this at length with some other folks, but just kind of going from the thrash death metal and being like, okay, now I'm just going to go more
Right.
acoustic, or I mean, you still have electric guitar in there, but kind of go more solo and just
Right.
focus on this. Like, what was that shift for you? Like, what pushed you that way?
Yeah, well, Epidemic happened a very long time ago. But yeah, so it was. I grew up sort of like listening to traditional heavy metal and thrash metal and,
Right.
and death metal and everything like that. And so, Epidemic kind of, over the course of everything we did, we definitely went from thrash, and then, then the final album, Exit Paradise, was pretty much a straight up death metal record.
That was the one I listened to, and I was like, man, this thing has some riffs in it. I mean, I really liked it. I was like, man, I wonder if there's vinyl of that. I mean, that was
Yeah,
my
I don't think
first-
there ever was vinyl made. We had like a 7-inch that had like one of the songs on there, and then had 3 other like songs. And
Oh,
that was
sure.
the only vinyl that came out of that release, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Although
it was great. It
The
was
one before that,
fantastic.
the Cameron Digas, get re-released on CD and vinyl.
Oh, nice. Okay.
But I actually much prefer Exit Paradise musically,
Yeah, I love it, yeah.
and production-wise.
Yeah.
So I'm still very proud of that band and everything. But then as towards the end of that, like in the mid '90s, sort of '93, '94, or actually more like '94, I started Old Grandad with my friends Max and Will, and that was originally just sort of like a silly side project, because Epidemic was such a sort of serious band, and
Yeah,
so
yeah.
wanted something where it was just like we were young, and I wanted something where we could sing about drinking and drugs, and
Sure.
or like sort of tongue-in-cheek sort of
I listened
tributes
to
to
one-
Satan and metal
yeah,
and everything like that.
I can't remember the name of the track. I listened to one this morning, and I was giggling, or I was kind of like having like the lyrics and just kind of the way, like it sounded like you mixed in like a little sound sample, where you kind of like there was some interesting little bits sprinkled throughout that made it kind of just like almost like party metal in a way, or just kind of like this fun rambunctious.
Yeah, there was a lot of party metal, especially the first album.
Yeah.
But then we got pretty like all 3 of us were vocalists and all 3 of us were songwriters. So it's like we had some really serious kind of more exploratory stuff as well.
Sure.
And so we definitely like always had that humorous element to some of the stuff, but the other songs where it didn't really have it. So that was when with that was I wasn't a vocalist in Epidemic, but I did write a lot of the lyrics. So but then with Old Grandad I started doing vocals. I would do screaming vocals, and then I would also do melodic vocals, and so that was the beginning of me starting with that. So that was like my foray into more melody. And then Aerial Ruin started after that, like in the early 2000s. So, and like I said, it was like, it was natural with these sort of, the experiences that I'm having that we've been discussing today, to have something, a vehicle for that didn't involve other people, and that also dynamically I could create myself, and it was about the quieter space between, musical notes, and it lent itself to my quieter melodic voice. So, and then I kept playing an Old Grandad for years, and it was always, I sort of imagined it being more of a side project, and then it's kind of become my main focus. Partially for practical reasons, because it's just I can tour with this all the time, because it's just one person. Like I don't have to rely on other people clearing their schedules, and it's just it's easy to be flexible, and I don't have to have a huge van, and easy for me to find people's couches to crash on when I go on tour, because I'm just one person. It's not like can all 6 of us stay with you?
Exactly. That makes a lot of sense.
So as being an underground, obscure musician, it's like it's really lent itself to touring. And so that's so partially it's kind of taken over because of that. It's not like I'm, I probably will be playing heavy stuff again at some point.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was going to ask about that as well. I'm like, do you ever feel like you may dip your toes back into that?
Well, we're going to be jamming old Grandad stuff
cool.
this summer, and
Sweet.
so maybe another album will come out of that. It's kind of hard because they live in San Francisco. So
right. Are you going to be the one commuting down there?
Yeah, I end up down there for work reasons sometimes. So it's
okay. Cool.
And then like I can end a Aerial Ruin tour down there, and
sure,
just do that. So that's hopefully that'll pan out with some results. And then I'm always open to doing other things, but it's just kind of, I'm in full flow with the Aerial Ruin stuff, so it's it's great to keep going with that, and I feel like I'm kind of like a shark, like I gotta keep moving or I'll die,
Right.
So and I'm slowly growing this small following into a slightly less small following by constant touring. So that is the way I'm, and every tour gets a little bit better than the one before. So I don't want to sort of just disappear off the touring map for too long.
Yeah.
And it's also because I love it. I find it very inspiring. And
but you've been touring. That's why. I'm glad we were able to find time to talk because you were on the road for so long, and then I saw I thought it was because you came back from Europe and then you played in Colorado Springs, right? Like the 71 Grind Fest. Or
I flew straight from Europe to that before going home, actually.
Jesus, yeah. And I saw that. When I saw Grind Fest, and I saw your name next to it, I was like, oh, that doesn't even make sense. But that would be really cool because if you listen to 80 grind bands, you'd be pretty. I think you would kind of.
Yeah.
It would be a bit of a burr hole after a while. Like, it'd be nice to have something to just...
the name of the festival is a sort of like the area code is like 719, I think. So they call it 71 Grind. It's a bit of a play on names.
Okay.
But yeah, those guys,
okay.
These two brothers who run the fest down there, and they've booked me down in Colorado Springs before, super cool guys. And so they put that festival on, and it's not all grind. There's a lot of punk and a lot of metal, and like from Seattle, really great funeral doom band, or my friends Bader Vogu who grew up from Oakland, and
interesting. Okay.
So there was some diversity, but I think I may have been. I don't know.
Acoustic guy then?
There was like a rap group that was like finishing out the first night.
Really?
Yeah, like a local rapper, and he was pretty badass. I can't remember his name.
That's actually pretty cool, huh?
Yeah, but I think I was the only sort of folky type,
I'm kind of kicking myself for not going because I thought about it, but I was like, it's a bit of a drive. If I were to, you have to probably fly. I don't think driving from.
Yeah.
Portland.
It's about a 22-hour drive to Colorado Springs.
That's a good drive.
I know because that's like stopping in Salt Lake and then Boise on the way home. If you combine those 3 drives, which are like 3 regular tour stops of mine, it's about 20 hours total. If you could maybe do a slightly more direct route, but yeah, I did. They flew me back home after that. So. But that was fun because they basically said to me, like, yeah, you want to come play 7-1 Grind, so when people are stumbling around all hungover during the day, they can listen to the soothing sounds of Aerial Ruin. They thought it would be a nice break for people. And I'm like, yeah, it sounds great.
Were there any people that were just taking naps during the set or something like that? Or just,
I actually played at the beginning of the second day, I think.
Oh, okay.
So I was like the second act on. There was it was set up with like a large stage in this big club, and then they had like a second smaller PA set up like at the other end of the club on the floor. So they had a loud band play. And then kind of like a post-black metal band, if I remember correctly. And then I played, and then there was never a break between.
It was like
bands.
Instantly.
Yeah, boom, boom, boom,
cool.
boom, boom. So like the band was setting up on one stage while the other band was playing. So
interesting.
Yeah. So people weren't yet ready for naps, but yeah.
And how was the? I wanted to talk a bit about. We weren't able to. It was kind of painful. Being able to communicate out at Fire in the Mountains without any cell service, being out there, that was you could not. You kind of had to just hopefully stumble upon people if you wanted to talk to them. But how was that? How was that whole show? That was the first time you've been out.
I've never played in Wyoming before, actually. Yeah,
really?
I've played a lot in Colorado and Utah and Idaho. But so that was great. I remember seeing that. I'd known about that fest before, and I've had friends that have played out there. Like I think Dreadnought's played there, and Wayfarer played there. I think a few times before.
Yeah.
Shane from Wayfarer was actually helping to organize the whole thing this year.
Right.
So that was really awesome. And I also played with Krallis, Infernal Coil, and Wayfarer in Boise to bridge the show. And then I had a Portland show opening for Sangre de Mordigo. Latona Odola in Portland the night before that. So originally I was when they asked me to play, I was like, okay, I may have to fly out, and then I saw that they're the Krallis, who's probably my favorite black metal band, was also playing in the Boise show, and Wayfarer was on the tour with them. I was like, okay, well, if you guys can just get me on that show, then I'll just drive out.
Sure, that makes sense.
But then I got there 40 minutes before my set, and I had slept for 3 hours the night before because it's like a 7-hour drive.
Yeah, we talked. Yeah, you mentioned that.
And I went over to a friend's house in Boise, and we were up like talking to, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my god, it's 4:10 in the morning, and I basically have to leave at 7.
Jesus, yeah, I was surprised you were still standing after your set. I mean,
I find that performing is the one thing that can really snap me out of fatigue most consistently.
Interesting. Just having the anticipation of knowing you have to go on stage.
Honestly, the 2 nights before, I felt like my performance was better than it was at Fire in the Mountains, but that's sort of minor internal observations. I don't think there was anything particularly wrong with it, and I certainly really enjoyed it, and I felt it was inspired and I was well received and everything. So, and it was just such a stellar lineup. Every band was really good.
That was a surreal experience being out there. I would never thought it was going to be that. Like just the mountain range in the background and just like the whole like the river running by and just like the whole atmosphere was.
And as much as it's admirable when you play these fests when there's like 60, 70 bands like 7-1 Grind, like 12 to 14 bands is a little bit more, something that I can fully appreciate. Like it's nice to have that, and then be able to just sort of sit there and like look at the stars or sit around a fire, and So I was just such a great time, both as a performer and as a fan of everyone else that was playing there.
Right.
I really just loved every band.
Were there any particular bands that you're probably pretty well established, or a lot of the bands, but were there any like surprise sets or any sets at that show that you didn't know much about the artist per se, and they kind of surprised you, or?
Well, I've been a big fan of and friends of Dreadnought for a long time, and been recently discovering Panopticon and buying. I have quite a few of their albums on vinyl now, and I'm becoming more and more of a fan of them.
Yeah,
but I played with them both at Roadburn and at Shadow Woods Metal Festival last year, so I got to see them there.
Sure.
So. That was really cool, and like I said, Krallis is
they're great.
Probably my favorite black metal band, and they're just I think this is the 4th time I've seen them.
Wow!
And then I just played with them twice in a row, so and they were just tore a hole in the fabric of space-time. I mean, that was just fucking incredible.
Yeah.
But then the band, so like and then it was the second time I'd seen Wayfarer, and they were like I think I saw them the first time like when they toured for their first album, Children of the Iron Age, and that was the only one I think I own a physical copy of, and so the new shit's even better.
Yep.
But it was like I'm not. So many of my friends are huge Wovenhand fans, and I'm certainly aware of Wovenhand, but like haven't dug into the catalog too much.
Likewise, yeah.
So it was cool. I really enjoyed it. Like it makes me more curious. But like I'm not as familiar with them as like some of the other bands. And then and Infernal Coil was just really interesting. Just kind of brutal.
I kind of liked how they had them on the bill because they were so. They were probably like the most intense musically.
Yeah.
I guess it depends on how you want to describe intense, but just like the blast beats and just like kind of just the raw energy coming from it. I liked just the differing.
Yeah.
Like every band kind of brought their own energy.
If you compare them to like Falls Auroros, who
yes.
I became friends with last year because I toured with Jordan from that band and Ray, like in other incarnations, it wasn't actually Falls Auroros, but they're like super melodic black metal, and like they're like, like Jordan is like a total like, I think classically trained musician and everything like that.
Yeah.
So they come from this like much more sort of like super melodic, like very technical sort of a perspective, and then Infernal Coil is just like really brutal, and and then Panopticon is just this different sort of influence with
some of those folk,
kind of country sort of stuff, which is very unique in the black metal realm, and then Krallis is just technical as fuck, and sometimes I'm like, is this even black metal? But whatever. It's like it's just
right.
And then like that Saddle of Southern Darkness just breaking everything up.
I thought they were phenomenal. They were probably one of my favorite or most surprising sets. I was like, people were just jamming out to them too in the crowd. People were like super doing. I was like, wow, this is.
Did you see they were like just jamming after those were around the fire, like after Panopticon got played?
Oh, right,
too?
right, yeah. No, that was great. Yeah, I really they took me by surprise. And Dreadnought, that was the first time I ever also heard them, and then I saw them live, and I was like, wow.
You
I was
really
very
need to dig
surprised.
into the records,
Yeah,
It's all 3 records are really, really great,
Yeah.
And you couldn't, a lot of the melodic vocals were a little bit too low in the mix for the set,
Sure. Sure.
That was the only sort of unfortunate thing.
Right.
They're a little bit higher in the mix on the records.
Right, but when they busted out that sax and then they had the flute, I was just like, what the fuck is going on?
It's so prog,
Yeah. I love it, though.
Yeah.
I mean, I love anything where it just kind of, I don't know, it just kind of tears that fabric of what you would expect usually from, say, a traditional whatever kind of band. Like, I always like it when bands...
First time I played in Denver, I think in 2014, was with them. And then, it's the kind of thing where, I'm like, whoa, they're really good. And then, I got the album, and, I liked it at first. But then it's, one of those things where it takes a long time to, fully grow on you, you know?
Yeah,
and then you kind of get really, hooked into it. And so it's kind of been like that with all their albums, where it's I like it a lot at first. But then, after multiple listens, you really kind of get to know the complexity of what's going on that particular album.
Sure.
And it just really sucks you in,
Right. Are there a handful of artists, like 2 or 3, you've stumbled upon somewhat recently that you recommend folks check out? I usually like to see what other folks are listening to, just so you can kind of keep, information about new upcoming bands or bands that interest you kind of floating in the ether and kind of getting people, hooked into new stuff.
Let's see here. Well, one thing it's always been, isn't particularly new, but it's a repeat of mine is Blake Green from Wolf Serpent has a project called Alter. It's spelled like Aelter.
Okay.
And so he put out the 4th album like that. It's essentially a solo project. It's kind of I don't know how you'd really there's some sort of folky sort of stuff, but there's some gothy and country sort of elements going on in there.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
Wolf Serpent is also an amazing band.
I've not heard of.
They're from Boise, Idaho. And so both
Interesting.
of those projects are really worth checking out. And he just started a new black metal band called Lunar Temple with some other friends of mine. And they have a new demo out as well. So,
Sweet.
But Alter Wolf Serpent is more well known. They're on Relapse and stuff.
Oh, wow.
So,
okay. I need to get better at my
But Alter
researching.
has only ever performed once or twice, so it's
Interesting.
more obscure. So I tend to point people who ask about random music in that direction, because I think a lot of people don't know about it.
Right.
Certainly they have their following. Let's see here. What else have I been listening to? I'm trying to think of. I feel like so many things that I'm aware of. I've been aware of for a long time.
No, and even stuff that maybe could maybe more obscure, because I always like to learn about stuff that or just kind of unearth things that may not be receiving the love that they deserve. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I always just kind of come back to thinking about bands that I play with live. That's how I discover a lot of my music.
Right.
I'm not necessarily keeping up with what's coming out, release-wise all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, if you haven't heard Sangre de Muertigo yet, the band I mentioned, it's this, all the lyrics are in Galician, it's an area of Spain.
Okay.
And it's
interesting.
It's really beautiful, sort of forest folky kind of stuff. Easy to find online. They have everything on Bandcamp. And then and I played some shows with Nest, who is my friend who plays on a Finnish instrument called a cantel, which is sort of like a piece of wood with a bunch of strings on it, about 20 or so.
Huh.
And it's a traditional Finnish instrument, but he has it. He's built a pickup for it, and he has a pedal board with all these sort of super reverbed out kind of effects. And he has a sort of improvised elements and more composed elements.
Interesting.
He did shows. He lived here for a little while, and he did shows with John Hom from Agalloch / Pelorian, playing accompaniments on guitar. Or did a handful of shows with Obsidian Tongue on the East Coast last year.
Okay.
That's a really good sort of black metal band with more melodic kind of elements, up in Portland, Maine, based right now.
Okay.
Or I've done a lot of touring with Divine Circles from Asheville, Carolina. Meg, who is a vocalist / violinist, and she kind of creates rhythmical sort of loop pedals by tapping her violin, and then does a lot of layering, and has various different people accompanying her.
Interesting.
And she was also in U.S. Christmas, which is a band from Carolina, who's maybe a little bit more known but hasn't been active recently.
Okay.
Weird name. It's not Christmas music. But
Yeah, I would never, even if I saw that online,
Yeah.
I'd be like, I'm not going to listen to that just because, I don't know, or maybe I would just glaze over it and
Yeah.
would never even put two and two together. That's what it sounds like. But
yeah.
interesting.
So those are a few thoughts. I mean, it's I'll probably think, oh, I should have mentioned this band or that band, but
of
you know,
course.
but,
Yeah, that's how it always goes. Are there any other bits, or there thoughts, or certain areas that I should have touched on, or is there something that's kind of like gnawing at you that you want folks to know about the project, or?
Well, not necessarily. I'm thinking about trying to do an EP that theoretically could come out by the fall, which would maybe, like, I have there's I think 4 songs that I recorded in the Nameless Sun sessions that I didn't quite finish.
Oh, cool.
And I want to go back and like listen to them and see what I think of them. And there's a song on the Bandcamp called Eigen, which has never been attached to a physical release, but I really love that. So I've always meant for that to be on something. So, and then I thought about writing a sort of like epilogue, and I've kind of started doing that, like sort of epilogue / afterword to the Nameless Sun cycle. And so that would be kind of like the, you know, the central piece of an EP with maybe Eigen and then 1 or 2 songs from the leftover sessions that theoretically could come out, you know, fairly soon, hopefully by the time I start touring again, but I don't know if that's going to be the case. Haven't decided if I like the material enough yet. But then I think it would be a sort of, those pieces wouldn't really be fitting on the next album because they're more attached to this last sort of cycle as far as the way I view them myself.
And it'll kind of bring it full circle, or it'll kind of just just shape the edges of it a bit more. Okay.
I think so. And then also, like, it would be cool to get like a release out by the time I hit the road again, whereas I think getting the next full length done is going to take longer, you know, and will be like a newer set of songs. And so I really like the idea of getting that out, but we'll see, you know, I have to sort of sit around with the material for a long time and decide if I think it's worthy of of coming out.
Yeah. What are you planning? So in addition to that, going on tour, where are you planning to head next, or what's on your itinerary?
Yeah, well, there's definitely going to be some touring in the fall, and I'm not sure the exact shape of that at this point, but I'm definitely going to be announcing that in the next month or 2. And that along with some other kind of potential recording projects that I think I'll wait till I know if they're going to happen before I sort of speak about them.
Yeah, sure. I understand.
Will probably be happening hopefully sometime this year too. So, yeah, I think it's nice to wait a bit before seeing exactly what's going to happen, but I'm also looking forward to being active again after kind of just working on stuff for the summer.
Sure. Are you still coming down? Are you still kind of decompressing a bit from the just absurd amount of driving and?
Yeah, I guess I'm pretty decompressed. I'm in a pretty creative mode now. Like I'm doing lots of sort of demo recording on my laptop and stuff.
Oh, cool. Okay.
You know, so I tend to do rough versions, and then I go record on my friend's home studio, Lot 3 Audio.
Okay.
So that's where I do the real things. But then I do, I tend to sketch everything out by myself first on my, shittier equipment. So that way I have something to listen to and I can decide if I like something before I take it over there.
Right.
Because once I get over there, then it's like, that's the real thing.
Yes. And does I guess just as a more general question as well, like the writing process, is it kind of something that do you tend to want to, do you give yourself a good bit of time before you decide to start writing again? And when you start writing, is it just kind of a natural, like you just feel compelled to start churning new songs?
It happens pretty naturally, and like I tend to be pretty prolific. Like I have a lot of ideas that never, quite make it onto an album. And some of them, like I'll record it and I'll forget about it, maybe discover it again years later and resurrect it.
Sure.
But sometimes, like being on tour, if I'm driving or traveling or something, I'll get just ideas in my head, and then I'll just record I'll hum some ideas onto the voice memo on my phone or something that.
Sure.
So a lot of times there's a sort of backlog of ideas.
Interesting.
So yeah, I'm never deliberately not writing, and usually there's an abundance, which is great. Like I don't think there's ever been a problem with that. It's more of a question of I have to get something, have a song somewhat complete, and then come back to it later to decide if I like it or not. And with Nameless Sun, I almost actually recorded over a 6-month period, like just on and off again sessions. Whereas the one before that was still, it was in and out of the studio as well, but it was all done like packed within a sort of 7-week sort of period of time. So I really liked the way I did Nameless Sun, where it was like I could walk away from something for a couple of weeks and then come back and have an objective opinion.
Interesting.
Because that's the thing about a solo project too, is you don't have bandmates to come in and offer their opinions when you lose your own
You can
objectivity.
just- right,
Yeah.
right.
So you have to. The only way for me to get my objectivity back is to put something down for a while.
Sure. I wanted to ask as well about drawing influence, maybe irrespective of music. You know, we mentioned and we spoke a bit about the cosmos, and like you read a good bit of science fiction and things of that sort. Does any of, like, are there other media outside of just music that you kind of draw inspiration from, or anything in particular that, I don't know, speaks to you in some way?
Not really.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that any influence from the sci-fi books that I'm fairly constantly obsessed with is kind of very secondary, you know. I mean, I like movies and things, but I don't think that that's really. I think that's much more of a sort of influence on older, like, epidemic stuff like that, you know, when it was much more thinking about, you know, human history and society and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Whereas this is, I mean, everything is an influence when
Yeah.
when you're channeling something from your own sort of, you know, psyche and, you know,
Right.
your own sort of spiritual experiences. Everything influences, but it's much more indirect. So
Interesting. Okay.
yeah, but yeah, I would say just encourage people to keep a lookout for any. You know, I will be announcing fall tour dates and. Yeah, some exciting things I'll be doing that I'm not going to talk about just yet.
Sure.
And then, yeah, maybe that EP.
That'd be sweet, yeah.
And, yeah, possible old granddad news as well. So,
Cool.
Yeah.
That sounds good. No, I just appreciate you taking time to speak with me, man.
well, thank
Thanks a
you.
lot. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate the interest and the support.
Reach on a fathomless sound again. Nameless sun could see the only passage on the wind. Hard fell is cast in all directions to begin. Now that you behold them, the twisted outlet south of refrain, where never is seen to arrive, and chaos is only to ever divide, as the seething that is broken has finished again for the nameless, and when deception is led as a lie to gallows of light stretching years through the sky, as a seed we're now to sail so far above the passage from the veil. Name the sun will only rage when two are burned to one. for a secret that stayed. All will fade, and all of belief in the shade. Where you have lain, yellow pine with shadow, and all that afraid, until we're away. above or below you will lessen the blow to the shell. In a flutter of wind, were it risen or fell, and as I will expand and abandon this fusion for cold, for a drift we have ice then to shift and to scatter as told, or inflame the embrace that engulfs and returns to the fold. When you're ever to see, but never to lie, if you sever the three, would you blacken tonight?